So as you know, this session is basically how to demo, but it's also just a little bit about how to present generally to a client or really to anybody else. And the alternative title for this is how not to confuse your audience. So what it starts with is rule number 1, which is don't use PowerPoint unless it helps to make your point clearer, okay? So why do I say don't use PowerPoint when that's exactly what I'm doing here? Very good reason for it. Because if we go to the Agile Manifesto and we look at the 12 principles that sit behind it, and we look at the 7th principle, what does it say? Working software is the primary measure of progress. So if you are doing demos, then that is what you should be showing, not PowerPoints, not Excels, not anything else, okay? However, obviously, you do sometimes need to set the scene. You do need to make some points, perhaps before you actually get into showing them the working software. So, all right, sometimes PowerPoint does have its place. But before you go anywhere near actually doing the demo, you have to remember what they teach you in the Army. And what they teach you in the Army is the 6 Ps, and I make no apologies for the language: proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. All right, you have to make sure you are prepared before you actually do the demo. But what does preparation mean in this context? What it means basically is one size does not fit all. All right, you need to start with knowing your audience. So who are you actually doing this demo or presentation to? So for example, is it just internal? Is it just other EPAMers, other team members? Is it the client? Is it both? Are the people that are watching the demo, are they technical? Are they purely business and wouldn't have know an API if it jumped up and bit them in the arse? All right. Who are you actually presenting to? Because that will affect how you present and what you present. Also thinking about why are they there? What's the purpose for them attending the demo? Is it just kind of a general understanding of progress? Maybe they're there because they need to see, how we're delivering, perhaps against the contract. They maybe need to watch it to be able to give a report to somebody else. Understand what are their motivations for being there. What are they expecting to see? So, and there's a difference between what they want to see and what they need to see. But you need to understand what they want to see, what they're expecting. So if what you're going to show them is different, you can explain that and you can explain why. And what are they feeling? So are they, as your audience, are they skeptical? And perhaps in the early stages of a project, they might be very skeptical about your ability to do what we've promised them. They could be very supportive. They might be worried. They might be excited. They might be all sorts of things. So the more you can understand your audience, the better. You have to meet them where they are. You want to understand how much do they already know. So in other words, don't go diving straight into technical details without context, like Postman. No, not that Postman. That Postman, all right? I've seen this so many times on demos, teams kind of jumping in, but all right, I'm going to show you in Postman, I'm going to show you a Swagger specification or something like that. And particularly the non-technical business stakeholders are sat there going, what the hell am I looking at? I've got no idea what this is, okay? The key point here is never assume, because assumptions make an ass of you and me, all right? Never assume your audience has the context. Always think about what you're actually going to be showing them and explain the background to it. Think about the frequency. So in other words, how frequently are you doing these demos or presentations? Is this a one-off? Is it, perhaps a pitch? Is it the first of a series of demos that you've done? You're going to need a lot more context setting, and that's where something like PowerPoint might be appropriate, to just give them the background, remind them of how we got to where we are or why we're doing what we're doing. You need a lot more context around your presentation, your demo, if this is a one-off or a first time. If it's infrequent, or perhaps if you've got people who aren't there regularly, you might just need to make sure you've got a bit of moderate context setting, a bit of a reminder for them before you go into it. But if it's a regular one, then it might just be brief. You might just do a quick connection to where you are in the progress. So this might be, we're on sprint 6 of 12, just set, kind of where are you in terms of progress? Remind them maybe a little bit about what you talked about last time, and then you can get into what you're actually going to be doing for this one. And an important one is know yourself. So we've talked a lot about your audience. What do they want from it? What are they expecting? What knowledge, what context do they have? But what are your goals for it? What are you trying to achieve? What action do you want them to take afterwards? What message do you want them to go away with? And what is the transformation that you're expecting? A good way of thinking about this is to write out the phrase, after this presentation, I want the audience to blank. And it's your job to fill in the blank. Why are you doing this? What do you want to be different after the end of your demo or after the end of your presentation? Because that will also affect the way that you structure it. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is tell a story. We need to set the scene. We need to introduce the characters. And if you're talking about a technical demo, that's the features that you're going to be talking about. You need to show the relationship between them. You need to make clear the problem that they're solving. You need to show how they can, what they can achieve together. And importantly, you need to explain what that means to the customer. Okay, so the customer needs to understand, why am I looking at this? Why is this important? Why does this matter? But before you actually get into doing the demo itself, something else you need to think about are hygiene factors. And I don't mean hygiene factors, all right? I mean the things that you need to make sure are properly in place before you actually hit the connect button. So the first thing is your connection. And with lots of us working from home, we've seen quite a bit more about this. You need to make sure that your connection is going to be stable, and you need a backup plan. Now, as you know, I'm one of the Agile trainers. One of the courses I was running a couple of weeks ago, we had a thunderstorm here. And not only did it knock out my wired connection, but it was also causing issues with my mobile hotspot connection as well. So make sure you've got a backup plan. You could ask somebody else to present, or you could, as I say, have an alternative, completely separate internet connection that you can fall back to. And the more important and the more high profile the presentation, the more important this is. If you've spent weeks perhaps trying to get the right stakeholders on a call to do a demo to them, and then you can't actually do the demo, that is an absolute nightmare, because then if you're trying to reschedule, that can really introduce a lot of delay. So always make sure you have some backup plans. Even if it's only somebody in another location can jump in, can actually do the demo instead. Something else to think about, and this came up in the questions, is environment. And I don't mean that kind of environment, pretty as it is. I mean that kind of environment, your test environment. Where are you testing from? And this covered quite a few of the questions that came up. So the first thing to do is please make sure you check what you're actually going to be demoing just before you demo, okay? Also, try and make sure, if you can, that you're demoing for an environment that other people aren't messing with. Again, I've seen too many demos where somebody goes in, then somebody else has checked in some code and done a rebuild, and suddenly it doesn't work the way that you're expecting, or even worse, doesn't work at all. So if you can find a way to make sure that the environment you're working from is stable during the demo, and if that means, for a half hour before, nobody touches it. Whilst we're in the demo, nobody touches it. If that's what you have to do, then that's what you do. Make sure it's a stable environment. And again, make sure you've got a backup plan if it's important, or if it's difficult to get stakeholders. Now, it requires a little bit more prep, and it depends on how kind of high profile it is, or how difficult it is to reschedule if you need to. So if you're just demoing an individual story to your BA and it breaks, you just kind of go, don't worry about it. I'll catch you for 5 minutes later. That's fine. But if it's a high profile demo, perhaps to the client, that doesn't look so good. So what I would suggest, and I've worked with teams where we've done this, particularly if you think it might be a little bit iffy, is actually do a video recording of it. Record the demo first, have that in your back pocket. So if when you do the live demo, for some reason it doesn't work, you can play the video recording of it instead. That can be a way of dealing with unstable environments or things that maybe aren't going to work exactly as you've expected. It does require more prep, and I always say you shouldn't be eating up huge, hours and hours worth of time preparing for demos unless they are kind of really high profile sort of one-off type events. For your regular sort of sprint demos and things like that, just make sure everything works. But if it is important, then do have that pre-recorded demo on the back end. Another thing that also surprisingly causes a huge amount of issues in demos is test data. Now, it is very tempting sometimes to just, do your lorem ipsum or whatever, but I've seen so many demos get derailed by stakeholders who've turned up and they start arguing about, oh, but you wouldn't get a price like that on that product. So for God's sake, that's not what we're here to talk about. So, but try and, if you can, avoid that by making sure you've got some properly representative test data. It doesn't need to be production, but it does need to be sort of close enough that they don't kind of pick up the obvious. And depending on what you're demoing, the sort of lorem ipsum type text, again, doesn't always necessarily, particularly if it's kind of e-commerce type website, doesn't always necessarily show the best example of layouts either. So because sometimes how much text there is really makes the difference to layouts. So again, just try and make sure it's representative. Some of the other hygiene factors that you've got, and I'm going to cover these briefly because I do talk about these quite a lot. Number one is your audio. All right. So again, don't forget, this is all stuff that you're thinking about before you actually getting into doing your demo or your presentation. And audio is important because you don't want to sound like you're doing the demo from here. Okay. I've been on an astonishing number of calls, including with some fairly senior stakeholders, where it sounds like they're doing the phone call from the bathroom. All right. And it's just echoey and noisy or muffled, and it's just horrendous. It doesn't matter how good your video is. It doesn't really matter how good the content you're doing is. If listening to you is physically painful, that people are going to tune out and they're not going to want to listen to it. And a tip for this is, even if you think your audio is okay, on the next group call that you're doing, that you get the opportunity where you're talking, just record it and listen to it back and compare your audio to everybody else's. Because it's astonishing how many people haven't actually checked what their audio sounds like. So either do a test call or record a call and just listen back and see what it sounds like. And one of the most common issues for this is echo, and it's because hard walls create an echo. So if you are sitting, and again, particularly with us working from home, if you're sitting in a room and there's lots of hard walls, not much in the way of soft furnishings, and especially if you're using a laptop microphone, that creates a lot of issues. And if you've been on calls, and again, a quick show of hands, either with, if you've got your camera on, put your hand up, or just hit the hands up button in Zoom. If you've been on a call where there's been an echo, where you're talking and you can hear your own voice coming back to you, quick hands up if you've encountered that situation. Yeah, I've got a few hands going up. Here's a clue. If you can hear the audio, if you can hear the echo, it's not you causing it. If everybody's saying there's an echo and you can't hear it, it's you. All right. And what's happening is the sound is coming out of the laptop speakers, it's bouncing off the walls in the room, and it's going back into the laptop microphone. So the usual answer is put a headset on or turn your speakers down. All right. So try and make sure your audio is okay. And also making sure you've got a quiet environment. Again, if you're trying to present, if you're trying to do a demo and they can't hear what you're saying because all they can hear is the people around you talking or whatever other background noise is going on, again, it's incredibly distracting. So make sure you've either got a quiet environment or you've got some form of noise cancelling, either in your headset like the one I've got on at the moment, or there is a software product called Crisp, K-R-I-S-P, which will also allow you to do that. But make sure they can hear you clearly. Headsets, okay, a lot of us wear headsets. I can see a few people on the call with them. If you are doing this kind of presentation, then you don't necessarily want a full headset on. So you might go perhaps for a desktop microphone, or you might go just for a little lapel microphone. Again, it depends how often you're doing these, how high profile they are, but good audio, regardless of how you do it, is important. So laptop microphones kind of range from acceptable to awful. If yours is acceptable and you play it back and it's kind of okay, fair enough, but do make sure you haven't got the background noise coming through. And the other bit is video. Again, how many times have you been on a demo or a call and you've seen this camera angle? All right, well, you're just looking up somebody's nose. All right, that is not a flattering angle for anybody. So get your laptop up on books, or use, as I'm using, an external webcam up at a bit more of a height. It just looks so much better. All right, and we'll come back to this point later on, actually, when we're doing the presentation. Another one to avoid is this. All right, so looking like you're in a witness protection program. Okay, again, don't sit with your back to strong lights and windows. People do actually want to see the person that's presenting, otherwise there's little point in having your camera on in the first place. And please watch out for dodgy virtual backgrounds, okay? Again, working from home, we've seen a lot of these. I've got a video on my YouTube channel which does about 20 minutes of how to fix problems with your virtual background. So I'll send a link out for that afterwards. But if there's bits of you popping in and out of existence, that's really distracting as well. Another helpful tip is have more than one monitor. Now, again, I appreciate working from home. Not everybody has this option, but EPAM will provide you, or at least certainly in the standard kit, with an external monitor. So if you only have a laptop and don't have an external monitor, at least for, I don't know, I presume it's a global policy, but certainly in our policy, you can ask them to send you a monitor. So have an external monitor, because what that then allows you to do is to have your content on one screen and the people on the call on another. You can split across the two screens, because if you are just talking to yourself while you're demoing, then again, you can't see what response you're getting from the audience. So have an extra monitor. And if you are going to be screen sharing, please practice ahead of time, okay? Number of people are getting to demos and are then going, where's the share button? Because you've suddenly realized you're using Zoom rather than Teams, or your client's tools are different to yours or whatever. If you're going to be demoing, please make sure you know how to screen share, all right? And there are some things that vary by platform, but the most common question and common difference I see is people either sharing a specific window when they're demoing or sharing the whole desktop. Now, there's pros and cons either way. If you're sharing the window, right, there we go. Not sure who that was. So if you're sharing a specific window, obviously it's only that content. You don't have to worry about tidying up your desktop. And I'll be honest, the vast majority of the time, that's what I do. I share a specific window. But if you are trying to switch between perhaps showing the website and showing Postman or something like that, it can be a bit slower to switch between them because you're having to stop and start the screen sharing. So you might, in that case, perhaps want to share your desktop. But that does give you the option for people seeing your desktop, perhaps seeing tabs that shouldn't be open. It might also, oh, sorry. And I have seen this happen. You're in the middle of a meeting and somebody sends you what they think is a private message about the person, perhaps the client stakeholder that's just asked something, and then everybody on the call can see it. So please be very, very careful if you are sharing your whole desktop. There are ways of hiding that, but I have seen this happen. It's excruciating when it does. A particular bugbear of mine, if you are using PowerPoint, is this. And again, you'll have seen this time and time again. People do, I'm going to share the PowerPoint, and they start taking you through like this. No, don't do that. Please put it in slideshow mode and then share the slideshow bit. Don't do that. And you can, of course, if you want to take it to extremes, do the kind of thing I'm doing, sort of the whole kind of weatherman style presentations, but there are simpler ways, the things like PowerPoint as a virtual background, if you are using PowerPoint. One thing, and for us as teams, and I haven't seen very many people use it, is Standout Mode. If you make sure you've got the latest version of the Teams client up to date, when you go to the screen share option, there's a little toggle at the top. It's not very obvious, but you can either share just like in the normal way, but if you click Standout Mode, it does basically this. It puts your video on top of what you're sharing. Now, obviously, if you're sharing a window or something like that, it's going to be full screen behind you, but that might be an opportunity to share your desktop, but just size whatever you're sharing to look like this. Use Standout Mode, and then you can do this without any additional software at all. All right. So if you have a look at Standout Mode, if anybody's interested in that, we can I can send out some more details. But you can do this kind of effect directly in Teams. I'm using a piece of software called OBS. There's other bits of software called Prezi Video, but there's different ways of doing it. But if you are, again, doing kind of particularly pictures where the audience being able to see you and how you present, how you connect with them is a key part of that presentation, this kind of style really works. But now it's time for the main event. Because all we've talked about up to now are the stuff that you do before you actually get into the presentation. We have talked a little bit about some of the problems you can encounter. So how do you actually structure your demo? Because this was some of the questions that came up. So what you're looking at is basically what are the building blocks. You need to be laying the foundation. So you need to be setting that context, say, starting with understanding your audience, making sure they understand what it is that they are about to see, why they're there, why it matters, okay? And then when you're looking at the stories, the elements that you're actually going through and demoing, is thinking about the sequence, thinking about building up a logical structure. So rather than just a random, perhaps going through, well, we'll do team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4. And we always do team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4. Think about the actual things that they're demoing. And it might be a different sequence of teams, might make sense on one week versus another. It might be that actually having team 1 do their bit, then team 3 do theirs because it logically follows on, and then team 2 do a bit of theirs, and then you're back to team 1 and then team 4. But think about building up a logical sequence, a logical story where one thing is building on another so that it's not just a disconnected set of, we've done this, next, we've done this, next, we've done this. Actually turn it into a story. And what you are ideally looking for, if you can, is to end up at the kind of final bit that you show where you get this reaction. You go, oh, wow, that's amazing. That's a fabulous way to be able to finish a demo. And I'll give you a very real example from the client I've just finished with, which is we've been doing, it's about 12 sprint development in total. And part of it was completely rebuilding their recruitment website that they use for the couriers. And what I hadn't realized, because nobody had mentioned it, was that the existing website had taken the previous provider months to build. And there'd been all sorts of arguments and backwards and forwards, and it was just a real headache actually getting that off the ground. Our teams rebuilt the entire website, brand new design from the ground up in one sprint. So when we actually, I realized this before we did the demo, so we actually put that last in the demo, and you can imagine the reaction that we got from the people that knew how painful it had been last time. So if you can find ways to get that surprise and delight and really finish on a high so that you kind of go, people go, wow, that's amazing, right, that's fabulous, everybody, great, we'll see you next time. If you can have your demos feel like that towards the end, if you can get that sequencing right, again, it just makes them so much more powerful and so much more impactful. But I'm now going to have a look at some of the questions, and we're kind of getting towards the end of the slides, but there's a couple of these that I just wanted to use an example. So probably wondering why I put a pantomime horse on the screen. The reason for that is that several of the questions are around back end and front end, hence pantomime horse. All right. So a bit like a pantomime horse, the back end doesn't make much sense without the front end, and the front end doesn't make much sense without the back end. So my standard advice is, if at all possible, please try and avoid slicing your stories that way in the first place. Do vertical slices so you can show a bit of the front end and the back end that goes with it. If you are slicing stuff horizontally, A, that makes demoing stuff much more difficult. And secondly, generally doesn't give you as quick a feedback and doesn't help you to integrate stuff. But if you do have to do that, what I would say is do the back end first and then do the front end. The reason for that from a build perspective is that the thing that normally trips you up is integrations. So getting that back end piece working so it actually does the functionality and then adding the front end onto it makes a little bit more sense. As I say, please, if at all possible, vertical slice, a bit of front and a bit of back end. But if you are going to do that and you are demoing a back-end piece on its own, and a typical example, and we've had it on our current project, is back-end APIs, then make sure you are setting the context. Explain to them where what you are about to show them fits in, what it does. And then if you do want to show, a postman request and response, okay, if you think your audience is all right with that. But it is useful to show, because what it proves to them is that the system is actually working. And again, go back to what I said at the very beginning of this. Working software is the primary measure of progress. So if you show them a front end which isn't connected to anything, it's like, ooh, that's pretty, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't actually do the function. All right, showing them the back end, saying when we get the request from the front end, which is coming, in the next sprint, then it will provide this request, and you can see these bits of information. So that's what will come. So imagine, again, get them to visualize it. Imagine you've got, and this is a simple example, but you've got a form on the website, a form on the page. It'll fill in those fields. The value from those fields is what goes into this request that you can see. And when we submit, it goes and it does stuff. And it comes back, and then perhaps, there's an email gets generated, whatever it is, but actually demonstrate to them that what they are seeing actually works and is connected to other bits and actually is integrated. But that's my advice around front end versus back end. I've been talking a lot, I know, because I kind of wanted to get through that stuff originally, but now we're into the question section. The people that were asking questions around back end versus front end, is there any other difficulties that you've had around trying to demonstrate that kind of stuff that I can help you with? So just unmute and ask your questions.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you absolutely fine.
My question is how to conduct the demo in case if we split it backend stories and we have finished just backend part. Is it good enough to work with Postman and other services, or it might be not demonstrate the functionality at all and wait for front-end part to be finished?
I would say if you have made progress, then demonstrate the progress. Go back to the Scrum values of transparency, and we'll pick up on this when we talk about kind of, what if things aren't quite going to plan as well. So it's kind of what I've just said around that back-end piece. If you are going to use a tool like Postman, because a lot of the stuff we do follows that sort of, headless kind of architecture. This is not uncommon, but make sure that your audience understands what they're seeing. So it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be technical. And again, I've been doing exactly what I'm talking about here with my previous client, is explain to them where what you're about to show them fits into the bigger picture, set the context, and then say, right, okay, so what we're going to have a look at is the back end that sits behind this bit of the system. And you might have perhaps had a slide or something that you've shown them to say, right, this is where that fits. And what it's doing is it's taking the information that we will get from the front end, and it's putting the information, and that's the request. So and give them analogies. Analogies are a really good way of demonstrating stuff. So APIs, you can say, imagine that I write down on a piece of paper what I want, and I give you the piece of paper, and you look at it, and you go and do whatever it is I've asked. And then when you write down the result and you give it back to me. That's what an API, that's essentially what the request response is doing. That's what we're looking at here with the Postman request. So what's going on to the request, the bit of paper that you're giving to the back end, is whatever that information is. When you hand it to them, if you imagine it's like placing an order in a restaurant, They might go off and do lots of things to actually produce the result, and then it delivers the result back to you at the end. So just give them those kind of simple analogies that anybody can understand. And then they go, okay, all right, fine, I get it. So I don't really know what Postman is, but I understand that concept. So then you can explain what the request is, what the response is. And then when the back end comes along, sorry, when the front end comes along, you can say, you remember that back end piece that we were looking at? This is the front end, and it's doing that same thing. So now, instead of me kind of manually adding the details into the request, the front end is creating the request. And now you can see the whole thing working end to end. So again, it's creating that context. It's creating that continuity through what you're demoing. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay, you're welcome. Any other questions around sort of back-end or demoing back-end stuff? Because demoing front-end stuff generally is quite straightforward, but back-end stuff is more difficult. No? Okay. Known issues, all right? So there was a question in the sheet that I got through about what if what we've built isn't actually working properly? Now, I always default back to the starting point of the Scrum value of transparency. It's one of the safe core values as well, is just be honest, okay? Now, I appreciate sometimes you're working with clients and that are less forgiving, should we say, and sometimes you just need to fix it before you show it to them. Okay, fair enough. I would much rather, if at all possible, that you are, through demonstrating all of the stuff that hopefully most of the time is working, on the occasions when it doesn't, you show them what the issue is, or what the how far you've got with it, because what that builds up is trust. And it might sound a little bit counterintuitive, because sometimes we think of, we get trusted because we always deliver. No, well, you do need to deliver, but you actually get trusted because they don't think you're hiding anything. And I've had experiences with clients where it has been hidden as to what's going on. And then almost inevitably, somebody finds out at some point, and it's like, why didn't you tell us? So I would say show them, because what you might also be able to do with that, if there's stuff that perhaps isn't quite working, is, again, it's about explaining context to them, because there may be things that they can help you with, other things that they can help unblock. It depends what stakeholders you have on the call. You can say, right, this is where we are. This is the issue that we've had actually during this sprint. This is where we've got to. We need some help with this. So that it might be environmental issues. It might be, you know, there's a dependency that's been late or something like that. So I would say my default start point would be just be honest about it. So I'm just going to stop the slideshow at that point and come back to the list of questions. So we've talked, I'm just reading down the list of questions that we had. So I'll tell you the questions that I'm looking through, and hopefully I've answered them. If I haven't, or if you've got any follow-up questions, then again, just please shout out. So tips for preparing for the demo. That's what I've been talking about context, understanding where they are, understanding what they already know, what's the goal of what you're trying to show them. Structure of the demo, I've talked about logical building blocks. If stuff goes unexpected, okay, make sure you've got a stable connection, make sure you've got a backup plan, make sure you perhaps have a recording, make sure that the environment isn't being messed about with before and during the demo. Yeah, so you can do that. Metrics for negative and positive feedback. Now, this is an interesting one. What is the person? This one. So this was Andre Irshutkin. I don't know whether Andre's on the call.
Yeah, hi, I'm here.
Hi there. So the question you'd asked was about metrics for negative and positive feedback. So what kind of metrics were you hoping for? What kind of thing did you have in mind?
Well, usually in product management, you count everything. And when you have like 7 stakeholders on the demo, for example, and you have 3 stakeholders with wow effect and 4 kind of silent, do you ever counted something like this, or it's like a common feeling and that's all?
Honestly, I've not sort of used any kind of quantitative metrics on demos. It's much more qualitative. So in other words, I'm looking for the kind of feedback and response that we're getting. So whether it's in a room or whether it's on a virtual, and again, this is why I try and encourage people to have cameras on for these kinds of events, is just actively call out, as you go through the demo, elicit feedback from them. Any comments, any feedback, any thoughts on that? Is this making sense? And again, as I've seen with the current client that I'm working on, they've absolutely loved it, because we've been demoing the whole system essentially every couple of weeks. The feedback I had from my main business stakeholder was the communication on this project has been better than any other. This is any of their other internal projects that have been run, because of the transparency. Back to that point again, back to the honesty. So we were doing all of the stuff I'm talking about here is not theoretical. This is exactly what I've been doing, including the stuff that hadn't quite gone to plan. And what the level of trust and rapport that built up with the stakeholders meant that when we got to the point that actually we had to push the project timeline back by a month. Now, bear in mind, this was only, sort of about a 4-month project anyway. That's quite a big shift. But because we built that trust up with them, it was just like, okay, fair enough, because they understood and they could see all of the work and the complexity of what we'd been doing. They knew that we weren't trying to pull the wool over their eyes. It wasn't just because we'd, been bad at estimating or something to start with. They trusted us that, no, if that's what we want, then that's how long it takes. And that was fine. So yeah, specific metrics. I mean, you could do something like a simple, kind of how satisfied were your kind of customer satisfaction score, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much did you enjoy it? On a scale of 1 to 5, how clear was it to you? You could do that, and you could track those metrics over time, and hopefully you can get up into the higher ends of the scores. But mostly, and if you don't get feedback on the call, and again, this is what I was doing, was go and talk to the stakeholders individually afterwards and say, how was that for you? Was that clear? Did you understand it? How did the other people on the call perhaps respond to that? Has anybody said anything to you about the demo? And actually get that kind of feedback as well, because particularly the more people there are on the call, the quieter people tend to be. They tend to just go, no, I'm not saying anything. All right. But try and get that feedback from them. So great question. Thanks, Andre. Let's have a look, see what else we've got. So known issues we've talked about. What do they like about a demo? What do they appreciate most? So this was Andre Pirov. Again, it's just really understanding how things are going. Again, we're back to the Agile Manifesto. Working software is the primary measure of progress. They love seeing stuff that's actually working, understanding how it's getting built up, what the complexity is that sits behind it. Now, not all business stakeholders are going to care about that, but they will all care about seeing visible, tangible progress. That's really what they care about. So the more you can show them that, the more they're going to like it. So we've got, Anna Supernova. So this was, how do you teach and coach stakeholders to provide meaningful feedback, i.e. the ones you can work with instead of, yeah, that's good. If they do say that, sometimes it's just a case of kind of being more specific. Okay, oh, great, I'm glad you liked it. What bits did you particularly like? And that'll help draw out of them, okay, well, this bit or that bit, or I thought the colors were nice, or I wasn't expecting that to be done so quickly, or whatever it happens to be. So you can ask them just to give some more details. If you can't do that on the call, again, it's back a little bit to what I said to Andre, go and talk to them individually afterwards and just say, look, acknowledge the good, the fact that they were really pleased with it, and just ask them to give you some more details. What was it you liked? Is there anything we could do to make it even better next time? What would you like to see on the next demo? Just try and get that feedback from them as well. So telling the story, we've talked about. Okay, so this is an interesting one from Ihor Chaivan. So what should I do if a customer doesn't consider a demonstration an important part of the work? Ihor, are you on the call? No. Can't see him in the list. Okay, I'll answer the question anyway. So if the customer doesn't see a demonstration as an important part, again, I keep repeating the same point, but it's because this is why we do all of this. Working software is the primary measure of progress. So you ask them this question: would you rather see a status report that claims where we are, or would you rather come and see the proof of where we are? Because for most people, they would rather see concrete proof rather than somebody's opinion, which is what a status report is in reality. So come and spend the time, actually come do this. And the other reason to say about the demonstration part is it is people that do the work. So, and this ties into some of the other questions about who should do the demo. If you have got particularly the teams that are building this stuff actually doing the demos and demonstrating the work, it's a great opportunity to help motivate the people that are doing the work. Because if you can get the senior stakeholders, and I encourage this, is get them on the call, because when you have, the developers and the testers and everybody that's been involved in actually building a piece, seeing, whoever's the senior stakeholder, budget holder, whatever it is, on the call going, yes, that's great, well done, everybody, that gives you a good feeling. So if they want to demonstrate good leadership, good motivation of their teams, be on the call, respect the work and respect the people that are doing the work. So you do have to kind of make them a little bit uncomfortable, because otherwise, basically, if you're not going to turn up to the demos, if you think that's not important, then basically you're saying you don't really care about what's being built. And you'd say, obviously, that's not the case. I know you do care. So come to the demo. That'll be my answer to that one. So what's this one? How do you demo technical implementations for the dev manager on the client side if he's completely involved in all the work related to our team? Okay, Igor Lemeshev, you are on the call. Sure. Yeah, can you just clarify that question for me?
Well, actually, it states all the time meant. So basically, we have the demo is for him, so he knows everything, the code, etc., the task, the stories.
Okay.
So basically, we don't have actually new stuff for him. He knows he makes code review, and everything is clear for him. So basically.
So what's the purpose of the demo?
Well, you asking me or?
Yeah, it's a genuine question. If you're demoing to somebody who's been involved in doing the building of it and knows all of it anyway, what's the purpose of the demo?
To show actual result, working piece of software, like working increment.
Yeah, but if he's already been involved in building it and knows it works already, again, same question, what's the purpose of the demo?
Well, another side is to actually involve other teams that could be possibly using this piece of software.
Right. Okay, that makes a little more sense. So so the audience for your demo isn't really the dev manager. The audience for the demo is the other teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's your answer. And again, this goes back to know your audience. Who are you actually doing this for, and why? So because that will shift how you demo, because it's not about sort of kind of impressing the dev manager, because he's seen it all, he's done the code reviews, he knows it works. It's explaining to the other teams what you've built and how it fits in with what they're doing, and that shifts the focus of what you're actually talking about. So that would be my answer to that.
Yeah.
Does that help?
I got you. Thank you. Yeah.
And just as a kind of a final follow-up, if it's unusual to have this situation, but if you've got nobody really to demo to who doesn't already know the stuff, don't worry about it. It's got to be adding value somewhere. It's got to be, having a result, having some form of transformation. What's going to be different after you've done this demo? And if the answer is nothing, then don't bother doing it. It's
okay.
Okay. Scenarios we've talked about. Okay, so question from Yulia sorry for the pronunciation, the surname Chuico. Key options to solve stakeholders' conflicts during the demo. So Yulia, have we got you on the call? No, doesn't look like it. Okay, so I'm assuming this question is along the lines of, what do you do if stakeholders start arguing either with each other or with you during the middle of the demo? And again, I've had this. It's a bit like what happens if you start getting into arguments and debates in a stand-up. It's a similar kind of technique, which is sometimes you let the conversation or the point run for a little bit. They might have something that's relevant and now is the right time to say it. But as the person who is facilitating that demo or running the demo, if you get into that situation that's just derailing the demo completely, you just have to step in and call a stop and go, look, obviously we've got some serious concern here or some issues here. What I'd like to do is discuss that afterwards. Let's set up a discussion to do that, but we do need to make sure actually that we get through what it is that we plan to demo here. We need to respect people's time. We've only got a specific time slot for doing this. So if everybody's all right, we'll carry on, we'll do with the demo, and then we'll pick up on that afterwards, in the same way that you would with any meeting where something is starting to get derailed. If you've got some stakeholders who do that repeatedly, and again, I've had this situation, find somebody either on, more senior on the EPAM side or somebody on the client side who's got the authority essentially to tell them to shut up, and get them to step in and do it. There's different ways of handling it, but essentially you do need to find a way of shutting that conversation down or kind of parking it for later if that happens in the middle of the demo. Okay. So what else have we got? All right, this question I didn't quite get. I'm not sure we got her on the call. So this was from Kiati Polaconda. How to answer that the current solution used to build the product is better than the previous ones? I can see you kind of smiling at that one, Yulia. Do you understand where that question's coming from? Because I'm not quite sure I do. No, okay.
Very interesting question.
Yeah.
It's from, I think, from Silas. It's how to sell this product, maybe.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of a political question, particularly where you're perhaps building something that is a replacement for something the client's already built themselves or that another supplier has already built. Yeah, you just have to be a little bit careful. But the thing to remember is you are there building a replacement for it because somebody somewhere knows that the current solution is not good enough. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there in the first place. So, yes, if the people who built it or built the current solution are on the demo and are listening, you need to be a little bit sensitive to their feelings. I'm not going to go, ours is amazing because the last one was shit. Yeah, you don't do that. But it's simply just try and keep the emotions out of it and just say, look, again, it's back to setting context again. If you think about it, why are we building this? The reason we're building this or we're building this feature or we've done it this way is because, as people on this call are probably aware, I'm kind of talking as if I was on the demo, that the issue that we have with the current solution is X. This is how we've addressed that issue. So make it about the system and the solution, not the people who built it. Yeah, so just try and keep the emotional side out of it. Yeah, that's probably the best way I can answer that one. One of the, I'll kind of touch on it again, is who should do the demo. Now, I get different viewpoints on this. I've been a BA for a long time. I've been a BA for 25 years. And I often see kind of the BA doing the demo, or sometimes the product owner doing the demo. I personally don't like that. because quite often what's going on, and I've had this on a number of projects, there's one in particular I remember where I kind of inherited the team secondhand, and that was what they're doing. They were spending time training the BA how to do the demo. And it's just like, that is a waste of everybody's time. You know, if you, and it was the QAs in that case that were training the BA, if you know how to demo the product, just demo it. Don't train somebody else to do it. Why are you training somebody else to do it? You're the people that have built it. You're the people that want the feedback on what you've built. So you show it. Now, I recognize that there are things that can make that a bit more difficult. So some people may simply not be comfortable presenting. That is one case. People may feel perhaps that their level of English isn't quite as good as it needs to be to do a presentation. Now, for one thing, I mean, it depends on the role you're doing to some extent, but I would say everybody, and particularly in the fully remote world that we're in now, any opportunity to practice your presentation skills, take it. All right. And particularly if they're just kind of regular fortnightly demos, they generally are about as comfortable as it gets in terms of first things to present, because you're demoing something that you've built or you've tested. You know this stuff. You're just talking about what you've done. So have an opportunity to practice the presentation skills. One of the suggestions that suggestions / reassurances that I've given to teams before is that if you are in the middle of presenting, particularly if you're kind of working to a script essentially, and somebody asks you a question or you forget your words, the English for something in the middle of it, I will tell you now from a native speaker's standpoint and from a client standpoint, whatever, they will have no issue with you dropping back to Russian or Ukrainian or whatever, just to quickly ask, how do I say this? And then come back to English. From our side of things, that is absolutely not a problem. You are doing the hard work of speaking in a second language, presenting in a second language. Most of us native speakers can't speak a second language. I'm always humbled by people that can. Now, I did get a rather strong response to this when I made this suggestion recently, because for some people, some countries, that sort of not being able to do it all perfectly in English is like this massive sort of personal failure, and it's a real failure if you can't do it perfectly in English. I can't argue for I can't change cultural background, but all I can say to you is to try and reassure you, the English does not have to be absolutely perfect every time, okay? If you can present work, if you can talk about what you're doing, and if you do need to drop back to native language and then come back to English, then that is absolutely fine, okay? But take the opportunity to practice your presentation skills. And the reason for this, again, it goes back to what I said earlier, which is you're doing the work for the client, for the customer, excuse me. So getting that direct feedback from them, building up that relationship. So you are not just the dev team or EPAM or whatever. You actually are human beings with a name and a face and a voice. And again, it goes back to building up that trust, that transparency, that rapport. So when things do get off track or get difficult, or you need a difficult conversation with them, you've built up that relationship with them. So take demos, take things like that as the opportunity to actually present your work, and try not to waste time teaching somebody else to present your work on your behalf, okay? Because that's not a good use of anybody's time. How are we doing? So we are kind of at the end of the hour, just looking at time. I think looking down the rest of the questions, I think I've probably pretty much covered them. One was, what if do you have the same person demoing time and time again? Again, related to the previous one, if you can rotate it, do. Particularly if different people have done different things, then get them to demo their own bit, rather than just one person doing it all the time. Again, same reasons. It helps you build up relationships, helps them understand that there is a whole team in there, not just one person that they keep seeing. So keep doing that. Okay. I think that covers all the ones I had on the sheet. Are there any questions or anything that because I'm aware kind of I've talked at you a lot, which I don't normally like doing, but I wanted to try and get through as much of this as we could. Is there anything that anybody wants to cover? Any advice that anybody would like whilst we just wrap this up? No. Has that been helpful? Give me a thumbs up or something. Give me a. Has that been all right? Again, you can use the reactions button in Zoom. Okay, so again, sometimes it was okay, good. Obviously, I try not to talk too quickly, but obviously this has been recorded. I'll make sure we send out the recording afterwards. And if anything that's been discussed on here, you want to debate with me, you want some additional help with, you want some advice, I've got this situation, how do I handle it? Please just reach out to me on Teams, particularly for the duration of this month. My schedule is a little bit more flexible than it would be normally because I'm doing some upskilling. So I'm very happy to try and help with anything that I can. But hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully it's been helpful. And I look forward to perhaps seeing you again in the future.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Lutz. Goodbye.
You're welcome.
Hope to see you again.